Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Top Voices, our podcast where we're very fortunate we have the opportunity to have conversations with global thought leaders. And we have today's guest is David Webb. So David, I understand, is extremely well known in this industry. I've definitely met you a few times at a few of the different conferences, but I know you've been in the industry a long time and you're well respected. So, and David is the Vice President of Global Enterprise Sales at XTM. In addition to that, we have the lovely Bruno. So Bruno Herrmann is a very well respected name in this whole industry, and Bruno works with International Achievers Group as our strategic advisor and also as our head of global marketing, which is great for us. My name is Paula McGrath. I own and run International Achievers Group, and what we do is we help organisations expand and grow and right-size, which is quite relevant at the moment, internationally in terms of human capital and operational excellence. So thank you, David, for joining us today. So I think we're going to get started, and if you're comfortable just tell us about yourself, how you ended up in this industry. How did you fall into the industry like an awful lot of professionals in a number of professions, and how you ended up with the lovely XTM?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the introduction. I suppose the story goes, everyone, you go to university and had a lot of fun there, came back home, and my dad just said, go and get a job. So
sounds
that
like
was
lots
really
of dads.
how I got into sales. So go and get a job, you lazy bum. So I started off in recruitment, but that was before the LinkedIn. So it was sort of, here's a yellow pages, here's a phone, off you go.
And those flip cards. Did you have
that
a
was
flip?
it. Off you go, right? And so
I actually wasn't in the industry at that stage. I have a very different background, but my God, it sounded hard.
I mean, it was tough. It was literally, but you know what? Actually, I'm grateful for that, because it puts the tenacity into you from a sales perspective, because you kind of tasked with doing. Here's a call. Let's go and call 100 people a day that don't want to speak to you, and they tell it. We won't use that because it's a live recording. But you get some choice words, as well as some pleasant ones as well. But it put a grounding in. And then how did I get into the industry? So at that point, the world collapsed, isn't it, as we know it, right? We've seen videos, and then an opportunity presented itself as a company called Applied Language Solutions back in the day. And they were a small language service provider based up in North Manchester. There's many of the colleagues that we had there in those days are now are very much still in the industry. But what I will say is we had a lot of fun there. It was a breath of fresh air. It was a breath of fresh air working at Applied Language Solutions back in the day. But then obviously there was a M&A process through them, and then it was time to move on. So how did I get to XTM? So we went through a number of different LSPs, client side for a little while, and then I had an opportunity to it was actually through a recruiter well known in the industry, who aligned me to XTM. So we had an interview with Seamus back in the day, Seamus Dermody, another well-known.
Bruno knows him, obviously.
Yeah. I had to fly out to Edinburgh, met him up there. But for everything a reason, and we met with Bob Willans and Andy, and that was 7 years ago. I'm really thankful for that opportunity. XTM has become a home, if you will, and an institution in the industry as well, I'd say, right? Thankful for the fact that we've gone into the technology side, because it's now becoming a really, really important piece, right? I think I've listened to quite a few of the different a few top voices. I mean, it is kind of a fundamental element, but I think ultimately it's also very challenging, and I think it's become a competitive marketplace. But that's for good reason, right? Because it's needed and required technology. So I think as Bug here, if you will, I think as a collective of technologies, we have a duty of promotion. because as we know it, localization, for most parts, for most global enterprises, is always a afterthought, if you will. I know the old saying of throwing everyone over the fence. I think it's important now that with a lot of the technologies now, I think it's now being recognized as part of a digital infrastructure, as part of a digital transformation process. But it's just how do we fit in there, and how do we now evolve because of the whole AI movement that we see, and how do we form part of that? I think so. Yeah, that was a little bit about me, and
That's great.
thank you for the question.
I have a funny feeling that you'd find fun no matter where you're working. You have that vibe.
Thanks. Yeah, you've got to. I mean, you're there every day. I mean, yeah, wherever you are, you've got to do with a smile on your face, right? I mean,
I'm going to actually pass you over to Bruno now because there's so many things you said there. I'm thinking Bruno's waiting to get going.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know, I'm excited. But,
wound up.
No, I wanted to start by circling back on what you said about yourself, David, which is that you worked on the client side as well, which is not so usual in the language industry. You have many people in the language industry, in all these LSPs and tech suppliers, who have been working only on the supplier side and never on the client side. And I think for yourself, David, and for XTM, this is really valuable because, understanding how client organizations are working, and we both worked in the life science industry, it's not just operationally valuable, it is also important from a strategic perspective, and say, yes, I understand if I work with that client, that, maybe a pharmaceutical company, I know what I'm doing, I know what I can provide as a solution, but in addition, I also understand how the client works operationally and strategically, so that I can walk in the shoes of the client and not just in the shoes of a supplier. And I think that, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think, as I said, it's not so usual that people on the supplier side also have experience on the client side. And do you feel also that as an asset for yourself and for XTM?
Yes and no, because admittedly it was a short stint. Because there was challenges that presenting themselves there. Because but yeah, I would agree, because it kind of loops back to that delivering the ROI, right? I think localization as a even as a category.
Yeah.
Right. If we talk about localization as a category in large organizations, it's really not well thought of. I mean, even if you think about these global organizations, if they're spending 10, 20, 30 million on localization, it seems a lot. But in the grand scale of things, these multi-billion organizations, it's really
tiny.
Nothing. Right. So, and then there's other more important digital systems that form part of the higher up the food chain, if you will. So to answer your point, Bruno, absolutely, I think it helps, but I think it also helps the experiences and the conversations. What I do particularly, we do have a very small industry, right? Everyone seems to know everyone.
Yeah.
But what I do like is everyone is also there to help each other, but also share experiences. Yeah. So to your point there, in terms of the pharmaceutical stuff, I think localization as a system, if you will, transcends into every industry. So every organization has a marketing department. They'll also have a HR department. They'll also have a technical documentation department, right? But then there's obviously nuances. But ultimately, even with regulated industries, if we call it, there's things and components in there that you need to make sure that you're adhering to, right? But I think for us, there's transferable skills, I suppose, is a good way to put it, right? So if we take you could self, Bruno, right? You've worked at various different organizations as a head of localization, right? Well, those skills are transferable because it's program management, specific to how delivering multilingual content and how we do that upstream. Because we hear all the time, right? There's also issues with content creation, and what does that look like in terms of transitioning into a multilingual. And now I think more so than ever, you're seeing a lot of localization managers transition or evolve their role, right? into digital experience, into overseeing content, right?
Mhm.
I think one of the problems we've got as salespeople within this industry, who owns that translation budget? Who do we speak to try and deliver that value?
Yep.
It's very different from every other. So if you go in selling a finance system,
That's
you
right.
know, you're going to go speak to the finance guys. If you're
Yeah.
selling a CRM or CMS, you go in speaking to the marketing people.
And David, I'm glad you use the word evolution, the evolution of people, from indeed, a localization role into what I would call global content operations or even global product management. And I think this is very timely and relevant now with AI playing out everywhere, where you have, of course, many opportunities driven by AI for people who are language professionals. Let's call them language professionals, PMs, salespeople, marketing people, and say, okay, today they are managing localization or even translation only, and because of AI has to be multilingual, they can evolve, they can transfer their skills, their experience, their expertise, they can transfer that to another role, which is going to be, for instance, language data manager, which is very specific for AI.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested also to get your perspective, because I've been following XTM for a long time, and I was lucky enough even to be invited at several XTM events. And for me, XTM has always been one of these companies in the language industry that has been really sort of thinking forward in terms of, okay, language management is much more than translation management. It's much more than localization management. It is content management. At the end of the day, this is, and of course, there is a word that XTM has always been using, which personally is one of my preferred words to define what language management is. It's ecosystem.
Yes.
From a tech perspective, language management has to happen in an ecosystem, which is made of a TMS, a CM, sometimes a CMS, etc. So of course, you are best positioned to see the evolution of these ecosystems that sometimes started as a TMS and now evolving to more components. And it's very interesting to see the latest acquisitions from XTM, which were in content operations. I would call that myself content operations.
Yeah.
How do you see that from your perspective? I would say not just strategically, but tactically from a sales perspective.
Yeah, so I think it's like a sweet shop. You can go and buy yourself a pick and mix, or you can go and buy a specific type. Cola bottles are a particular favorite of mine.
Uh-huh.
Although little fried eggs, I really like those. But that aside, you're absolutely right, Bruno. It's a complementary ecosystem. So they all service various different elements of a wider localization strategy at large organizations.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a huge shift, right? Even in the last 5-10 years, YouTube, my kids love YouTube, love it. I can't stand it. Trying to get them off it is just like, right,
Wrestling.
yeah. And I think everyone has to suffer with that, right? But yeah, there's a people like now, right? If you've got a problem, right? I'll give you an example. My Velux window, I could not get it to open. The first thing I did was straight onto YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
didn't go and read a manual. I went and watched a video.
Yeah.
So there's an evolution in terms of content delivery now.
Yep.
So to your point, I think there has to be an evolution as well in terms of organizations with their strategy. And that's basically what we've been doing in terms of looking at how we can get complementary solutions so we can service our customers better. So, yeah, we don't have to cover every single one, but we have XTM, of course, as a translation management solution. XTF is a business management solution. Riggy,
Yep.
and more recently TXTO Media.
Yep.
Well, as well as Transifex, right? So this is to service different areas of the market to give us a complementary solution. So if our customer comes to us, we can sit and consult on best practice and sit and think, right, okay, what is it that you're looking for? Why is that? Strip it back, ask the difficult questions, because I think transparency, and going back to the very point before, right? I think we understand the localization is very niche, but I think people are open to answering those questions, and then we can sort of say, well, A, are we a good fit?
Yep.
B, what does that look like? And C, which one's going to help mature your localization program so you become visible within your organization to help you deliver an ROI. Because a lot of customers now will say, well, I want to go into a new language. We'll make up a fake one, Dothraki, right?
Yeah.
We want to go into Dothraki. The first question C-suite are going to say is how much money are we going to make from that?
Yep. Absolutely.
So how do you deliver on? If you're going to go and ask for $1 million and say, all right, I need $1 million because we're going into Dothraki, is going to, we need to get this marketplace. If we're investing $1 million, what's that ROI going to look like? So I think a technology ecosystem can help you with that messaging. But I think that is a very important message to have to build value as you as a localization professional, a buyer of localization in large enterprise.
Yeah.
You'll have had that many times, Bruno. I mean,
yeah, no, I totally agree with what you said, and that's why I always found those events organized by XTM very not just interesting, technically speaking, because I love technology, but okay, technology has to create value, otherwise technology is just useless,
Yeah.
I remember just some sort of personal experience. I remember one day I was invited to the XTM event it was in New York, and I had a quick chat with your CEO, so Jan Evans, and he was telling me that, first of all, he was glad that I could come, etc. But also he told me that he invited people to speak at that event because all these people speaking on stage, clients, of course, but not just clients, also internal people, were going to talk about the value that was created. Not just, oh yeah, we've got great technology. And then the next question would be why? For what? To do what? And I think I loved that what he said, that he was selecting actually speakers to be on stage, not just because they were good speakers, but also because they had some value to demonstrate. And I think that's to your point, David.
Yeah,
when you talk
absolutely.
about ecosystems, that is about value at the end of the day. It's not just about technical features, etc. All that is very exciting and interesting for people who love technology, of course. But yeah.
I think that, the fact that you have been at XTM for a number of years now, that you're there long enough to see the change in the marketplace. And I suppose I'm interested to know how your conversations with your targets or your existing clients are now, even compared to they were 24 months ago. Because obviously...
I think I've seen a shift a few times, right? I think I've seen a shift a few times in that when I first started, a lot of it was just TMS, it was just translation management solutions, and then it was kind of going to use evolution a lot today. But then there was always like a discussion around connectivity. How do we connect to various different systems, whether that be a CCMS, CMS, PIM solution, whatever it might well be. And then, of course, we talk about evolution, but I think everyone would agree in the localization professional, the AI piece has been around for a long time for us, right? I mean, but it's absolutely put, I think, translation on the map. I think interestingly, I think a lot of people have been posting about it, right? About AI and how that looks like. And the interesting point, you've seen it all over LinkedIn about the OpenAI doing everything through humans and not using their own, drinking their own Kool-Aid, if you will. But yeah, the topic of AI, I mean, the question begs of what does AI mean to you? I think is something that we need to understand first and foremost with any prospective buyers or just individually as organizations. What is AI and what does that mean to you? So the conversations have evolved, but I think again, half glass full, always, right? AI has put us on the roadmap because content is going to only ever grow. It's always just going to keep on growing, right? Which therefore would indicate that the localization industry is also going to grow. So I think there's been an evolution, but ultimately, what does AI mean to people? So the conversations are now, C-suite are saying, we want AI. what does that actually mean? What does that mean, and how does that facilitate? So that's kind of a consultative discussion that we have to have as I suppose the salespeople, and people have to have buyers internally. What does this look like, and how's it going to impact the business? Because not least, there's various different components you've got to think about, right? Ethics and GDPRs and privacy and data and all that kind of stuff, because that's a hot topic as well, right? But to answer your question, yes, there's been a evolution with those different conversations. I've definitely seen that over the last.
Surely cost must be a large part of the change in the conversation, because I don't know, I'm not a technician, and I'm sort of making an assumption that some clients, potential clients, think that it should cost next to nothing because of the magic 2-letter AI.
Yeah.
Now tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know.
Probably twofold, right? I think
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything new, right? When Google Translate comes out,
that's fair.
just
Yeah,
Google
yeah.
Translate it. Just Google Translate it. So I think the rhetoric is it's been there for many years, right? Just Google Translate it, or just put it through Microsoft. Or so there's a somewhat of a naivety as what translation requires until there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
I remember one customer many years ago telling us, it was a we won't name them, but it was a product recall for them in the life sciences industry would cost them $1 million per day. So if a better translation impacts that,
I know.
and it could impact life, right? That is really bad. But the other thing that I was just thinking that crossed my mind there in terms of the zero cost is we're also seeing the talent that's for the industry kind of drying up, because courses are closing down. Linguists are leaving their jobs to find other professions because this zero cost is a dangerous rhetoric, I think, because a human in the loop is always going to be needed in some way, shape, or form. But ultimately, it's just what does that look like for them?
Yeah, I think it's just I suspect it's the conversations that just happen at the early iteration of any massive change.
Yeah.
We were actually speaking with a very interesting individual earlier this morning, and I thought that he actually was able to express, he's older than you, and he was talking about, he remembers, when the internet, he had to convince people that the internet was here to stay. And, so of course you get a couple of years where people go, no. And because there's all sorts of personal interest in holding on to the old way sometimes. So it's just the early stages of any massive change. I think in relation to the talent that's needed, that's an interesting comment about the courses that are needed. It just must be quite difficult to identify what course to run, though, if you have the funding in the first place. To identify what course do you run? What are people going to need in 5 years' time or 4 years' time? So if you were sending your kids into college now, how would you identify if they were interested in the technology world? I don't know.
Well, I actually, my eldest son, we're trying to, think about a pathway for him. Because when I was younger, I don't think my parents, sorry, Dad, but
I love you,
was
Dad.
educated in what the workforce would look like, right? When I was 14, 15, did I think I was going to end up in the localization industry? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So it's something I'm actually going through now with my eldest son about what kind of pathway do you take. But from a language perspective, obviously it is core within the secondary education we have in the UK. But I honestly don't know, if I'm honest. I think you're just going to have to watch that space, and I think we have to be reactive to it.
Yeah. It's a conversation that Bruno and I have all the time. Obviously, because I'm in the staffing side of this, and Bruno's obviously our industry expert that works with us. So, trying to make sure that we're at least one step ahead of what our potential clients or existing clients are going to need. There's no point in somebody coming to us and say, I need this, and this is our plan for the next 12 months, which is pretty much how we work with organizations. And if we're not, anyway, we're not, but the whole time having these conversations. So this is where Bruno's going to jump in now and talk more about the new roles and where are they. And I think what's happening now has always been happening. I've been in this recruiting industry for years and years, and before that I had a different profession altogether. But there always has been, based on my little tiny world experience, the ability for some organisations to know how to sweep up the best talent. It's really interesting to see how they do that. And they seem to be able to, and it's not always down to them having loads more money. It's not always down to that, based on my experience.
Yeah. No, it's indeed it's a very frequent conversation that we have, and specifically, I was a hiring manager for many years, and now Paula is of course an expert in recruitment and selection. I think that now it's a very interesting time, both for recruitment experts and hiring managers, to look at the evolution, again, let's use the word evolution, the evolution of roles. And the evolution of roles should be in sync with the evolution of requirements. The evolution of requirements in terms of tech and non-tech skills. Of course, it's always a mix. And I think that, interestingly, when I'm talking to some of my clients as well now for the moment, they agree with me, surprisingly, a little bit surprisingly, that, AI is changing a number of roles, because AI is like a coin with two sides. You have a side which is called automation, which is a tech side, and you have another side of the coin called AI, called augmentation. Augmentation is the human factor. It augments, it amplifies the potential and the value of human beings in this new framework called AI. Of course, I know AI means different things for different people, but at the end of the day, it's like the big picture is indeed that, today, and I'm sure, David, people like that as well, there are people who have been PMs for, OPM for years, or someone who has been a linguist for years. Suddenly, they decide that they want to take another role, which is more AI driven, and they become language data managers. They become, I would say, knowledge managers for, so they move from, I would say, the accountant framework to a data framework. They become more knowledgeable about how to manage data, because there is no AI without data. So it's just there is a shift of attention, and of course Paula sees that in the job descriptions that are coming. It is of course now today, if you are in the language industry, more often than not, you have to be at least a bit knowledgeable about data management, just because data is everywhere. So do you see also that, of course, XTM is working with different industries, with different clients, and do you see the same sort of evolution of roles for people who are today in the language industry, that are, as I said, head of localization, for instance, and they are moving slowly but surely to something closer to, let's say, language data, head of language data?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a transition for that, in terms of being more important, and they're coming together. Because I think, again, as a category, I think localization as a whole, in terms of even a reporting line, right, where would that sit, right? Typically it would have been the marketing or something else, right? But I think they're now becoming more important as part of that ecosystem, because I think there's a knowledge shift inside organizations that then, again, it's all attrition back to revenue streams. But ultimately, I think that's where the evolution's coming from, because, again, this is an assumption, but you just take an educated guess at the evolution of those roles from head of localization to, I don't know, head of global content experience. I don't know, I just made that up, but the fancy title, by the way. So, but
those titles exist. Those job titles exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that would then imply that they're becoming more important within organizations, by my opinion, if you will. So I think you see it in terms of you you see it everywhere, right? But then, but again, my optimism is that they are becoming more important within organizations, and localization or translation, however you want to describe it, is becoming a key element of content work streams.
Yeah, supply chain.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned optimism, because my optimism is coming from something else, which is that whenever people talk about LLM or SLM, there is always a L that stands for language. And okay, you might say, and that's unfortunately a mistake that some organizations are making now. They are sort of giving the ownership of multilingual AI to data scientists only. And it becomes part of an IT organization and no longer from a marketing or from a content driven organization. And the reason why I consider that as a mistake is, of course, that even a multilingual data scientist will never be as sensitive or will never be as knowledgeable as a language expert. So both have to work together to make sure that multilingual AI comes together as well.
That it
But
works.
works, well, is effective. But I think that also getting your perspective on this sort of this sort of well, I wouldn't say mistake, but this sort of challenge, that organizations have regarding actually how to not just use language model to say, okay, it's a buzzword and we need LLMs, we need SLMs, etc., but to really make the L that stands for language work.
Yes, as a whole, I agree with you. I think, shamefully, and I get asked often by friends and colleagues when I tell them I work in the translation industry,
Mhm.
and this is true. They ask them, they say, "Oh, so what languages do you speak?" And my response is always English and Mancunian, being a proud Manchester-born
Yeah.
individual. I don't speak any other language. Well, not that I don't want to embarrass myself. You can get by when you travel. But the importance of it, we've seen it over the course of 20 years, is knowledge about things like semantic, lexical data that resides within the makeup of language. Because the beautiful thing about it is even though, we talk about translation memory and segment level stuff like that, but
Mhm.
the beauty of language is that it does evolve,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like my son, keep reference my family here. I've got two sons and a daughter, but they come home with some weird and wonderful sayings, and I'm thinking, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So it's not, well, structured content, obviously it's kind of static data, if you will. Obviously there's dynamic elements to it, but there's an evolution with language. It's an art form, essentially. There's not really a science. There's a beauty to language, if you will.
Mhm.
So to the data scientists, you think, and where I'm going with it really is from a science and an art perspective, the language expert is the artist, and the scientist is looking for structure within a language, but that can then impact the L
Mhm.
or the LLMs, because even then you've got to think about nuances because as you talk about data is key to building that, right?
Mhm.
So then you got to think about high resource languages, low resource languages.
Yeah.
Where's the impact of that, right?
Yeah.
And then that again feeds back in terms of global demographic and where do organizations then place that. So passing it to a data scientist absolutely needs to be complemented by a language expert,
Mhm.
because they're going to know those nuances about lexical data, oralization, and all of those various different things that you need to, regular expressions and internationalization, and all of these various different things that have to be considered when you look at kind of a portfolio of what needs to be translated in this day and age.
Yep.
Because everyone's glued to the phone, so you need iOS, Android applications, software
Yeah.
applications, you need the technical documentation, you need all the marketing collateral that's going around that. You need to educate internally with your sales organizations, e-learning materials. So there's kind of a knock-on effect in terms of all of that. So that is all a very long-winded way of me saying I agree with you, Bruno.
It was interesting though. It's interestingly expressed. How then do you manage your teams to try and make sure they're on top of all of that? Now I know obviously as the leader you're expected to know much more than maybe they're expected to know.
We're fortunate to have a team that are educated, have been in the localization industry for some time. But I
Okay.
think a lot of that comes with experience, right? I think a lot of it comes with experience and conversation within the industry. I think that should not be underestimated.
Mm.
So I think with anything, I think experience. You can go to college and you can go and learn all of these different things, but you can't take away from real life experience. I think
Mm.
finding those out and having discussions with people is still a human element to it, right? I don't think AI is going to take everyone's job just yet. I think it's more of a productivity feature to help people facilitate those mundane tasks.
it's a very interesting time, very challenging, but interesting too. Time, because now the way I see it, and I'm not the only one, but I'm not in the majority in the language industry. Is that there has never been a better time for language technology to be more integrated or to lean more into the businesses, into the business processes, because actually, for me, throughout my 25 or 30 years now, in the language management space, I've always considered language tech, starting of course with translation memories, but now being AI, and I always considered that language tech had to be part of, a product supply chain or content operations, I would say framework. And now with AI, that's my personal opinion, of course, that I see that, of course, there is a very nice opportunity, timely opportunity, to actually say, yes, let's take language tech to the next level. And that next level is within either product management or content management, because language technology can then demonstrate even more value than if it's managed separately, as a sort of separate tower, as I call it. The way I see XTM and the big players in the language industry is that indeed there is this big opportunity, but it's very challenging, so it's not easy to achieve. Which is to say, yes, we know we have a great tech, we have a great value proposition based on technology. But we know that it's essential to contextualize this value proposition. And for me, when I hear the word contextualize, I say product management, content management. Just wanted to get your opinion about that sort of challenge.
I agree with that. I think the biggest thing is, and this is for most language technologies, is visibility within large organizations. Because as we talked about before, I think it's not always recognized as highly as, let's say, content management systems, right? Or now we've got product information management systems. They are highly recognized in this hugely competitive market, right? But for where we exist, and we are seeing a shift in visibility of language technology. But I think we've all collectively got a duty to help promote that together, so we can help grow the market, right? What that looks like in terms of how that's broken down in the kind of the pie chart, I guess we'll have to wait and see a little bit, because we're in the .com, I suppose, bubble at the minute. Hopefully it doesn't burst, but we'll see. But yeah, I think we've seen now it's forming part of digital transformation. Not everywhere, but we're seeing that. But it is an important component within organizations that recognize that translation is an important component of them being able to go global, because we've all seen the bad translations, right? We've seen all bad examples of that, and we laugh at them, but they do have a business impact.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And a reputational issue. That's the problem,
But I was checking lately some recent job descriptions for candidates that International Achievers is looking for, and I was not surprised. I was pleased to see that there was a role called AI Strategist. AI Strategist, and in the job description you had, for me, some sort of perfect mix of language skills, expertise, let's say, and on the other hand, some sort of capabilities or skills to implement AI in a context of product and content management, so that it doesn't stay like something up in the air. To your point, David, that it doesn't seem to be not so valuable at the end of the day, but that AI becomes real for people, just like language tech has to become real.
It actually also improves the chance of the service offering, or whatever way to put that, it integrates it more into a business. And that is what this category needs to focus on having the services and the offering integrated into the business, because if it's actually only seen as a standalone, I don't know, like a big pimple, it's too easy to take it out and to keep thinking you're going to replace it by something cheaper and cheaper and cheaper or no cost at all. And it's a nightmare for any business trying to operate in that space.
No, it's true. Again, it comes back to the old just Google Translator, right? But
Yeah.
to your point around the roles, and I am plagiarizing this. So, but ultimately, I think with AI, it's been said many times, AI is not going to take over your role.
No.
It's going to be someone that knows AI more so than you do that's going to take your role. So I think people that are now educating themselves with different AI principles, with different strategies, with technologies that are available to them to enable them to do a job more efficiently, that's they're going to be the key challenge, I think. So I think we all need to remain open-minded as to what's available out there and just embrace it to a degree.
I know.
I think it's an evolution. For us, we've seen it, right? We've seen it for many, many years. I was fortunate enough to, in my early days, to work with a gentleman called Professor Andy Way. And he was introduced us to when we were talking about statistical machine translation, when the Moses engines came out by Kern et al., right? And then obviously we've evolved after that, but there's an evolution before that as well, right? So, and I think the LLMs has just gained such traction because of OpenAI, right? It's just become so visible because it's now global, but ultimately they've become that was the evolution from what's been within our industry for many, many years. So I think you just need to evolve and educate yourselves on what the best practice is, because even with MT providers, right? Even with MT providers, they will be specialists. Some will work better in some languages and domains than others will.
Yeah.
Tell us about XTM. What size are you? What's your space in the, where you are aiming for in the market? What's your ideal client? And then
We've grown over the years, right? We've grown from where we were to where we are now through a kind of a more ecosystem. But XTM itself, we've got some great people that work here, right? We've got a very good organizational balance.
you have a very good rep.
A good reputation.
Oh,
You do,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Where do we play nice? I think really with any kind of technology, unless you put it in Google Translate, it requires a human, believe it or not AI, to manage all of that for you. Yeah, with tons of automation that we can bring, right? And my colleagues do ridicule me sometimes for my favorite saying of a lights out strategy. So in terms of end to end, in terms of human intervention. But ultimately, the technology requires someone to manage it. And it's the same thing for a CMS or a traffic management system or something. It requires individuals. So with XTM, we are a mature solution. So where do we play nice? We play nice with more mature localization ecosystems. But then again, we do also have service clients that are marketeers, for example. They're not necessarily localization managers or head of localization. We have marketeers or sales orgs, or we have a diverse portfolio. So we can fit everywhere. It's just about, again, the visibility of that, because there's a tendency with large organizations to want to, I suppose, throw it all over the fence, as the saying goes, right? But it's true that having an objective platform, allowing you to have best of breed suppliers, as well as taking control of the cradle to grave content to multilingual delivery in-house, can deliver real ROI. And it promotes a get it right first time policy.
Absolutely. And I mean, you just brought up another very important point, in my opinion, which is the fact that companies like XTM, they bring solutions and not just services. Because, having worked for so long on the client side, I was interested in getting some services, some new services or old services, but those services were more directed to me as an individual, and as opposed to a solution that was more more applicable or more usable for more people,
organisation.
for the
Yeah.
organization itself.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, yes, it's a way to a way to amplify the value of language technology, which is not to bring it or not to position it as a service, but to position as a solution, so that the organization can understand that language tech is not just for a few people in IT, for instance, but language technology is also for marketeers. It's also for product managers, because then it becomes a real solution. It becomes a real added value, which is for a service. Yes, services are great, but services are sort of very very natural, and people say, oh yeah, that's a nice service. But when they see a solution, they say, wow, that's a great solution. It's a different level of experience and different level of value creation. And I think that language tech needs to be positioned as solutions and not just as services.
Yeah, I think also there's been an evolution with the services side as well, right? Where it just takes specific content and translate it, right? Now you've got other kind of dynamics. We go back to the YouTube, right? You've got agencies that do dubbing, subtitling, voiceovers, all of those various different things. SEO agencies that do multilingual SEO, and that's all they're dedicated to doing. So there's kind of nuances within that, right? Or specifically structured content for documentation, right?
Yeah.
Providing consultation services. So yeah, I think that is now becoming more less generic and more kind of focused to become subject matter experts, because ultimately that's how they're going to differentiate themselves. That's where they add the value, I feel. I mean, I've not been in services for 7 years or so, but or if not longer. But you've seen the evolution now. Maybe
I just think that you'd be fairly heavily dependent on a sophisticated listener to understand the difference.
Yeah, but
which makes it difficult for a person trying to
but
sell.
In my experience, it's not the case with XTM and companies of that size and of that maturity. But I remember when I was meeting some potential suppliers in my previous jobs, some suppliers were actually they were creating or offering language technology, but they were positioning it as a service and not as a solution. And I said, yeah, that's great for me, but if I'm going to sign a contract with you, it has to be a solution, not just for me and my team, but also for the whole organization, and say, yes, language tech is a solution for me. It's a solution by nature, but don't position it. If you are selling it, if you are sort of talking to a potential client, don't sell it or don't position it as a service, because it will be downgraded. As in terms of value creation here, I'm not talking about the technology value. Yeah,
I think that raises also an important question. Maybe Bruno, you can answer this. Is that then, as a salesperson, we've done our job. We've convinced you, right? As a localization manager, said, right, okay, and you say, right, that's a great tool, right? Whatever it is, doesn't matter. So then, how do you then go internally and then be that salesperson internally to promote that solution? How do you go about doing that?
Well, my experience is that indeed, when I was leading digital globalization, which was one of my roles, and many people were asking me, digital globalization, what does that mean practically? And I said, it is content creation, content localization, content delivery, the whole content operations framework. And when I was sort of buying, just to use the word as a buyer, when I was buying language technology, of course, I wanted this technology to be valuable for me and my team, which we were doing, for the whole operations of content, but also that I could quickly, or as quickly as possible, let's be realistic, I could also be the internal ambassador using this technology solution to say, yes, it is used by my team, but actually it is used in the interest of the whole organization. And to your point, I sometimes felt like an internal salesperson to my colleagues in other functions, and I had to tell them, for instance, in product management, I had to tell them, yes, this is used in my team, but believe it or not, if it's not used by my team, your products will never be available in multiple countries. So I was making the connection between language tech in my team as a solution for my team, but also as a solution for the whole organization. And it was, to your point, David, it was some sort of sales speech in a way, just to demonstrate that I was part of the same company, but I was not just working for myself. I was not just working for content operations. Content operations is an enabler in an organization, but at the end of the day, products and services need to be out. They need to be sold by the clients. So I think that there is this job. I'm glad you bring up that point, because indeed, I was sometimes seen as maybe not a salesperson, because that would be a strong word, but as a sort of evangelist, as some sort of connector, if you will, between language tech and why it brings value to other organizations. And these organizations sometimes, lead the legal teams, for instance. They said, why should I be aware of language technology? Because I'm a lawyer. I'm an internal lawyer, so my job is legal. So why Bruno, why do you come with language tech now? And I said, well, there is a connection between what you do, in legal affairs and what my team does with, language technology. So it is a way, again, to contextualize at the scale of the whole organization.
But that's heavily dependent on you being sophisticated enough to understand that. Can I just make a comparison to recruiting? So I used to get approached, and I still do, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day recruiting of the business now. I have a much stronger team than I am at it. But sometimes senior execs, let's say Bruno comes to me as a senior exec who wants to move, and I would have a conversation. Of course, everything we do as recruiters, it's all heavily structured, because if it's not, you're going to miss too much information. And at the end, then I've had a conversation, said to Bruno, so are there target organizations that you'd like us to approach on your behalf? All the usual things that you can imagine.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that I have said to senior execs is to ask the senior exec to pitch themselves back to themselves. So Bruno then wants to hear what I'm going to say about him. And you wouldn't believe the stuff that I think I've understood, I think I've contextualized effectively, all that lovely stuff. And then we can have a conversation and say, well, Bruno might say, look, honestly, I know you've picked up the fact that, and I might have banged that drum a bit too heavily, we need to go back and relook at another drum. So that might work for organizations. And I've done that in the past, and it has really worked. But that might work for teams that are selling. It might not, I don't know. But, selling as an offering into an organisation. So let's say you're sitting in front of the evangelist, you're sitting in front of the Brunos of this world. But there might be one Bruno in the whole organisation. Sometimes if the relationship is strong enough to say, I'm probably telling you stuff you know already. You've been in sales a long, long time and you're very well respected in this field. But to say, where do you think this technology will work in your organisation? And then who are going to be the objectors to it? So do you want to pretend I'm the objector and let's have a conversation? And then you can help maybe reframe the wording or the phraseology or the return on investment to help your evangelist.
Yeah, one of the questions I was going to say is quite a harsh word, but how do you enforce centralization, right? But I think from our perspective as salespeople, just in general, I think you have to build a trusted partnership with your evangelists. You've got over the major hurdle of right. We've found the solution. You've seen the value that it can bring, but how do we help you grow and cement your position within a large organization? I think that's really important that you do develop a partnership with your key stakeholders there, right?
Yeah.
And you can learn from each other.
Yeah.
You build up partnerships and friends. You build up friendships.
Yeah.
Right.
But also life's short. Why wouldn't you be decent to each other? I mean, you're not going to jail comfortably with everybody, but
no. But again, if you treat people with respect, you get respect back, right? I think respect is not given. So
exactly. I mean, you just harvest what you're sowing, and actually, it's when I was listening to you, David, and saying yes, we need to be close, as close as possible to our clients, not just because they are going to give us money, but because they are going actually to make us ourselves the solution provider. These people are going to make us sustainable in the long run, not just. And I think that this is one of the probably no, not one of. This is probably the biggest, the most obvious evidence that you have to draw the line in the whole language industry. There are two categories in language tech. You have really the vendor, the commodity vendors. Then they sell commodities, and okay, respectable, fine. But then you have the partners, the business partners, and this is really, that's what I said in a previous podcast. Someone was explaining what he was doing with language technology, and I said, "Well, you are using technology as a supplier, but you are willing. I'm saying willing." To actually lean into the business processes of your
Yeah.
client, not just sell and say, "Hey, wow, that's the solution. Now up to you guys to do the rest." No, you are bringing the solution because you are the expert in language tech. But in addition to that, you start leaning in the business processes of your clients. And that's where it becomes a partnership for me.
I agree, and I think that experience that we talked about earlier is that when it comes into play. So for let's specifically at XTM, we have a wonderful customer success team. They're brilliant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they lean into their partnerships with their clients, right? Um, you have to have knowledge in understanding that and being able to ask the right questions at the right time, but that comes through experience, and I think they become trusted advisors, if you will. You've got to get to. So I think, but people buy from people, right?
Yeah.
In everyday life, right? You go into any shop, and if someone's pestering you
I
about the
know.
next mobile, do you want a mobile phone or do you want this? Or you're like, sorry,
Yeah.
mate.
Yeah, I haven't got the energy for this.
Yeah. So you just got to kind of guide them through the process. You've got to become that trusted advisor, and because you, like we say, people buy from people, and you wouldn't buy from someone that you don't like, I guess. I
Yeah.
mean, unless you like really need that technology, you're not going to go and buy something that you don't need.
It's fascinating, though. I'm still thinking of a few budget airlines that still seem to thrive despite a particular
Well, that's because
culture.
you need the.
I know
Well,
they've actually grown the brand.
you can't get away from them. But if
No,
you
I
had
know.
other options, you would avoid them, right?
I know that. I agree. So tell us then, what is the focus for you in your role at XTM over the next 6 and 12 months?
I suppose putting it simply is just having, speaking to the buyers that are looking at different options right now, and I suppose nothing's really changed in the sense that we're looking to grow our portfolio, speak to new buyers in the marketplace, look at the various different industries, and see and promote XTM
Yeah.
into various different, and our portfolio of product as well, right? So we're not just as limited, if you will, to one solution. We can offer a product portfolio that can solve many business challenges. So whether that is just we support language service providers, we support enterprises, we support non-for-profits. We can cater for all different types of requirements, but the team that we have are going to have to have those consultative sales with people to understand. I mean, it's the old adage, right? Where do we lean? We lean on someone's problems. As harsh as that sounds, it's identifying and listening with intent to sort of see, right, okay, can we help you? It's a bit. I think that's important for me specifically to see, can we actually help you, and be honest to sort of say, well, can we? And if there's kind of a bit of a gray area, what does that look like? But just having a transparent conversation with people to sort of say, can we support you? Yes or no? But at least because of the industry working, you've made a new friend or a
Yeah.
colleague, right? I think it's just important. So for us, it's about having meaningful conversations, and like we say, we don't promote the come and buy this mobile phone because it's the best this and this, right? You must have this. It's not forcing it down someone's throat. It's taking a consultative approach, because these things do take time. It's not
Yeah.
as if with any kind of technology, it's not something that you can just take out one day and put in the next day. And that's the same for any kind of technology that you have, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it takes time, right, and resources. So I think us understanding them and having that knowledge that it does take time allows us to have that and be the consultative sell. But to answer your question, You know, we're in a sales environment, right? It's the same for you as well, Paul, right? It's about
Very
winning
same.
new clients,
Yeah.
satisfying your existing ones,
That's it.
and growing your business.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, David. Every organization, every person is different. I mean, you have to sort of adapt yourself as a business leader. You have to adapt to what people, your clients, are needing. And I'm glad you mentioned your perspective on what the future has in store for you, because in the past years, I think 3 years in a row, I was invited by your marketing team in January, so the beginning of the year. I was invited to share my own predictions, and I said, no, I have no prediction, I have wishes. My wishes, I can share. And your marketing team is very smart, because they asked me the same question in January, February. Bruno, what are your predictions? What are your wishes? Because I said wishes. And then my answer is always the same. I say, well, language technology is about solving problems. Give me the list of problems and I will tell you where language technology is going to head to.
I couldn't agree more. I think we need to listen. We need to listen, not dictate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're providing a solution at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the challenge is that for all of us, you mentioned it, Paula, not just in January or February, because that's the beginning of the year, but throughout the year, we are never sure about what problems we're going to face. And today it might be great. On Monday we might have a problem, and of course, the next day might be a day of a problem, and then of course you need to bring a solution to that problem. You need to solve that problem, and at the end of the day, if there was no problem, there would be no tech, no discussion, etc., because everybody would be happy and say, I can sit and just relax on my chair every day. But of course, the reality is that every one of us has issues, has problems to solve. Problems for ourselves, problems for our business, etc. So the driver, at the end of the day, the drive for all the business of language tech is problems.
Yeah, I agree.
It sounds very negative, but it's actually very positive for me. As long as we solve problems, we are just relevant.
That's not negative. That to me is just pragmatic.
No, because for some people, problem sounds negative. For some people.
Okay.
Yeah. Not everyone.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is true. How can you, there's positive ways of saying it, but I agree there is a pragmatism to that, because you're not going to get anywhere. How can we help? How can we evolve?
Yeah. So again, we want to thank David Webb, who's the Vice President of Global Enterprise Sales at XTM. You've been very generous with your time. Very, very interesting perspective.
I've enjoyed it very much.
And Bruno, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Bruno. Thanks, Paul.